Welcome, welcome to another episode of The Shaman's Wife. I hope you're enjoying this mini-series with my dear friend Alicia. And of course, if you want to find out more about Alicia, or more about me, or more about the Heads Together podcast, go to the show notes. There will be all the links you need. And if you haven't already, I urge you to pre-order your copy, or if you're listening to this when the book has now been published, order your copy of The Shaman's Wife. This is a transformational book, and I'm so honored to have Alicia with me for this mini-series where we are diving into the background to this powerful memoir. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Heads Together podcast. I'm Jill Mokes, and I am obsessed with cutting through the noise when it comes to growing your business. Each week, via intimate coaching conversations and inspirational stories, I share what it really takes to get the results you want in a way that feels right to you. I am all about attracting higher ticket opportunities, building authentic relationships, and creating the abundant, full-fat version of your dream business. I mean, how many of us have beavered away creating a light version of what we really want? The thing is, I honestly believe when you're outstanding at what you do, there is no limit to what you can achieve. So, are you ready to put our heads together and make it happen? Let's go. Hey, Alicia, welcome back.
Hi, Jill. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really good. How are you?
I am torn between being overwhelmed and excited.
Oh, I think we have a word for that. The combination of being scared and excited. I used to know someone that called that scare-sighted. So I'm not sure what overwhelmed and excited might be. Oversighted. Maybe not oversighted. That doesn't work. But I get the vibe, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Anyway, it's all good. It's all good.
Exactly. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think feeling overwhelmed can give rise to some incredible creativity, actually, if you lean into it and allow it to.
Yeah. I've been writing a lot on Substack and other areas, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah. This week, we're on episode 5 now of our little mini series of The Shaman's Wife. And I think it's time for us to go a bit deeper into the concept of the shaman and the principles of shamanism, because I think there's going to be a lot of people listening who have a kind of a vague notion, maybe a bit like me. This is probably the category I put myself in, of having a bit of a vague notion of the concept, but not really understanding what it is and what makes a shaman and what the principles of that are. So can we dive into that this week?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. You know, people look at it as a mystery. And I also notice that in Western cultures in particular, I'll just speak for the United States, what people understand shamanism to be in the United States is not the shamanism that I experienced in Ecuador. It's different. It's been a little corrupted, if you will. It's been assimilated into more Western kinds of mental models. I asked, when I first started learning about shamanism, I had read about it a long time ago. I really didn't fully understand it, and it took years actually to really understand it. But when someone asks me, what is shamanism? My answer is it's a set of fundamental principles around life and death. That's like the most simplistic statement I can say, definition. It's not a religion. It's not a philosophy. It is not held hostage by social norms or religious dogma. And it's based in the natural elements. And when I say it's based in the natural elements, I'm not just talking about all the good stuff in nature, but also the real fierce stuff in nature. And so shamanism kind of plays in the dark while holding the value of both light and spirit. And one of the fundamental principles in which I've always believed is that everything is energy. Everything.
Yes.
Including words, dreams, everything is energy. And what shamanism does, it shows us a network of like an energetic grid, I guess you'd say, that connects us all. When I say all, I mean humans and all living beings. Since everything has that energetic quality to it, you either contribute to life or a generative process, or you contribute to a destructive process, which, we call death. So again, just shamanism is based on certain principles around life and death. Does that make any sense at all?
It does. What was interesting for me when you said that was that it's not a religion and it's not a philosophy. I'm starting to understand that now, because I suppose on the face of it, for example, Buddhism, we would call that a religion. I think some people would call it a religion, others wouldn't. And that's quite principle driven. And I guess there could be parallels drawn, but I understand what you're saying, that this really isn't a religion. So I'm really keen to unpack that a little bit. What is it about shamanism that, if you like, categorizes it or doesn't categorize it as a religion, if you follow me?
Well, I think a religion has a structure to it and rules, if you will. It's not based on the natural elements. It's not actually based on nature. We used to say that shamanism was like the first, I'll call it a tradition. All the other religions are kind of built on that. So you will see elements of the principles of shamanism in different religions. Like the connection to all beings is something that we see in a lot of Eastern cultures and Native American cultures. Even like Christianity became more of a political system, really, economical political system. That's what religion is for me. It's that kind of structure. Shamanism in its purest form, it is what it is. In other words, it doesn't try to be or do or make anyone any different than what they are. So it addresses the natural world in all its raw power. And that means, then this is what I talk about, life and death. In shamanism, each relationship forms a spiritual connection. And we are this accumulation of our experiences that generate positive or negative energy. So if we're not aware about those connections, then a lot of times that's what drives illness. And this is from a shamanistic perspective. So what a shaman does, he kind of, or she acts as a liberator, if you will, conducting rituals to free the essence of the spirit so that we can grow into our own destiny without all those things that hold us back.
Something really beautiful about that, quite poetic about that, as you explain it, Alicia. I often find that when I talk to you, that there's a real poetic nature to the way you talk about this.
Hey, can I share a story with you?
Yeah, please.
When I first went to the rainforest with Napa, I'm a person who, like, the Holiday Inn is roughing it. So let's just be clear about that. So I went to the rainforest. They have a little house in the rainforest. And he had said to me, if you have to go to the bathroom, wake me up, because the bathroom was away from the house. It's a bathroom. It's not just an outhouse. It's actually a bathroom. It was away from the house just for hygienic reasons. And I woke up around 4:00 in the morning and I had to go to the bathroom and he was so asleep. And I thought, oh, what the heck? All I have to do is walk down the little path and the dogs are out and nothing's going to happen to me. Right. So as I'm walking down the path, I would just remember, obviously at the rainforest, it was hot, but I stopped and I just listened. And what I heard was this symphony of sound. Like all the animals were singing, all the insects were singing. It was like this orchestra that was at once in harmony and at once in chaos. It was both at the same moment, this kind of chaotic sound, noise coming from everywhere, surrounded by sound. And yet there was this implicit harmony in all of it. And I just stood there, and then I looked up, and I've never, ever seen stars like this. The whole sky was this like dark midnight canopy with these twinkling lights, just millions of them. And I'm literally surrounded by this environment, right? I'm surrounded in the air. I'm listening. I'm feeling the dampness on my skin. It's a total experience. And I had this sense of complete oneness, a sense of belonging in a way that I had never felt before in my life. It was like on a cellular level, there's a part of me that is as wild as everything in this environment that I'm standing in, and I'm hearing and I'm listening and I'm seeing and I'm feeling. And that sense of oneness is like an experience of what shamans experience in their attitude around universality. I don't know if I said that correctly. Universality, where, one of the principles is called totalidad and unidad. And totalidad is whole or all of it, and unidad is one. So it's like a plural and a singular. And it's probably one of the most fundamental principles in shamanism. It is like a hologram where the whole is contained in the unit and the unit contains the whole. And that's the experience I had of that oneness, that it was even more than being interconnected. It was actually understanding in a really physical, visceral, emotional, spiritual way that we are part of each other and part of all that there is, even as we are individuals that contain all of that. Because our cells contain the same matter as the universe. We exist as universal beings. And so that is the concept of like, I am whole unto myself, unidad, but I am part of this wholeness, this unity, this unifying universality, and that's totalidad. And I define myself as this and that, both singular and plural at the same time. It's a really hard concept to understand if you try to understand it with your mind. And I didn't actually get it until I had that experience, because it was such a powerful, it was like a melting into everything that there was. It was the most amazing thing. And that is how I came to understand it, through that experience.
And I think you've probably just helped many other people understand it too, because the way you just told that story was incredible. So something that came up for me as you were saying that was, this is a really difficult concept to understand, first of all. So if anyone is listening to this and thinking, it's a little bit like thinking about infinity. I can't really get my head around that. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But something you said earlier, I think just speaks to this, which is, it is what it is. And it's a phrase that I hate when people use in everyday life. Well, it is what it is. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's ridiculous, right? I hate that. But if ever there was the perfect sentence or description for this utter, raw, unadulterated nature, Gaia, whatever you call it, in its rawest form, it is what it is perfect for that. And that, for me, has really brought home why shamanism is, you're comparing apples and pears or apples and oranges, or apples and tables, if you try and compare it with religion, because it's not a social construct. And religion, in my opinion, is much more of a social construct for us. But this supersedes, it's just much bigger, isn't it, than anything that we could boastfully claim to be our own. I don't know if that speaks to you, but as humans, we often proudly, boastfully claim elements of life, nature, whatever, as our own, because we have this ridiculous idea of our own importance. Shamanism is about as far away from that then as anything could be, isn't it?
It is. The divine aspect, if you will, is they call what someone else calls God, they call the creator. That's the word that they use. So at the center of this, what we call totalidad, this oneness, is the creator. It's not a creator like a person. It's a life force. In shamanism, the belief is that we are one with all things because we are participating in that totalidad. So unity with self, with other humans, and with all things is a union with the creator, which some people call God, that provides the universal gifts that enrich us and are shared by all of us. And so what we acknowledge and use that awareness to understand that we are in our truest nature, spiritual beings having a human experience. And that's a big difference. Whereas like in traditional religion, like when I grew up Catholic, this concept of original sin is diametrically opposed to what in shamanism sees as we are all born innocent, because we are all born from that divine seed, and that our true nature isn't of sin, it's of love, and it's godlike, and it's that divinity that exists within all of us when we are truly acknowledging that we are spiritual beings. And I'm not saying that every minute of the day I can live like that, but like in moments when I'm sitting on my terrace, having my cup of coffee and just being quiet and listening to the birds and breathing the air and listening to the leaves as they rustle, those are the moments that I feel that kind of oneness and that kind of divinity permeating not only the environment, but in myself. And I think, for anyone who's creative, I think that's also like the fountain from which we drink. That's our creative source when we create art or music or writing or poetry or anything like that. I really do believe it comes from like a divine source. One of the things that happened with my son, who's a very creative person, he's an artist, he's a photographer, he writes music. One time I asked him, and this is many years ago, when he was just getting into music, and I don't know, he was in his early 20s maybe. I said, Joseph, when you create music, how does it start? Like, it's all original. So where is this coming from? And he said to me, Mom, I dream it. I'm having a dream and the music is playing and I'm listening to it and I'm trying to make sure that I get all the notes. And then I wake myself up just a little bit and go to my, whatever the machine thing is that he uses.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I write, well, his language was, I put it down. And he says, and then the next day I replay it and I fine tune it. And so I said, so it comes to you in your dreams. And he says, that's where it starts. It starts there. And what he's telling me is it's coming from the universe. It's coming from out there. And when you're a creative person like that, whether you know it consciously or not, you are actually saying, I am a spiritual being who has this access to something beyond this reality or the logistics of the mind. And I'm listening to this sound, which in his case is music. For me, it's words. For someone else, it's color and painting or ceramics or whatever. And then we bring that through us and then we create something. So in many ways, I've learned that shamanism is a way of looking at our creative life too, from a contemporary kind of perspective.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think things like, so for writers particularly, I think things like writer's block is absolutely comes from trying to get the words from inside your head instead of just quietening and then allowing them to come from the outside. I experience that all the time. And I think that's something we don't do enough, is quiet ourselves and our environment enough to actually hear what's coming through to us. And it's something I have to really work on to intentionally do, because it isn't my default to sit quietly, but it's kind of essential. So this is really bringing the concept of shamanism to life. Talk about inspiring landscape. I love actually thinking about you on the cliffs, Alicia. I do, because I can so vividly see what you see every day, just from my memories of being there with you. And it is absolutely incredible. You couldn't fail to be inspired by being able to drink that in every day. I think you're giving us such a good idea now around the concept of shamanism. And I want to go a bit deeper into these principles of shamanism. Can you share with us a little, maybe a couple of the principles to give us some examples of that?
So the first one was the totalidad unidad, what I just spoke about. Another one is that it's called in English, how do you say it? The universal movement. And what that concept is that without movement, there cannot be life. And I'm not just talking about physical movement. It's like when we strive to maintain our security or our status quo, we are more comfortable with things that are familiar or make us feel safe. When things change or they move, we don't feel safe, but we also feel more alive, right? Because there's that aliveness means movement.
Yes.
I tell clients oftentimes, like, you're either going to move with the flow or you're going to resist and struggle, because the world is going to continue its rotation with or without us. It really doesn't give a crap about us. It's like what you said earlier. It's our inflated sense of self is an arrogance that's born out of ignorance of the universal laws that exist outside our purview.
Absolutely.
And so there's this idea that life is movement, life is change. And it kind of goes hand in hand with everything is energy, because shamans see the world made up of energetic particles. They actually call them particles, partículas. And their skill is being able to move those particles to open up the flow of energy, even within the body, which is how they heal oftentimes. And when particles move, energy changes, and even cellular transformation can take place. So you'll see people being able to do things that they weren't able to do before. And I watched him do this with people when he would be healing them.
Really? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So at one point, we had this woman come visit us. She was walking with a cane. About 5 years earlier, she had been in a tragic car accident. Her brother was killed in the same accident. And ever since then, she had damaged her leg and she had not been able to walk. I was with Napo in our office and we did some work with her. In my case, it was more dialoguing, and in his cases, he's taking it in because I was also translating, because she didn't speak Spanish and he didn't speak English. One of the things she shared when she shared that her brother had died, I remember looking at Napo and him looking at me, because we both thought the same thing. This isn't about her leg. We both thought, this is not about her leg. This is about her gift that she survived and her brother didn't. And so she came to us about a total of 5 times. And she told us she had gone to all the medical people. She didn't want to have surgery. She had done all these kinds of different therapies and nothing worked. I'll never forget her walking up the stairs without a cane, walking normally. This is the 5th session. And she said, I was golfing this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
And she was like a completely different person. Not only was she walking, but you could see it in her face. There was an aliveness, right? And I can't really tell you what happened within each session, because I just feel like I can't do that. Yeah, it was all healing and energetic work. She said, this is my last session with you. And it was, but like she said, you changed my life. I feel like I have my life back. And we had other people come to our place in Ecuador that also had significant issues and, around grief, around addiction, which is based on, in many ways, grief and loss as well. So he, as a shaman, isn't looking at necessarily the body. He always says every disease is a disease of the soul. And so that's where shamans go. Disease is a spiritual event where the spirit is inhibited by negative energetic forces. So it's the shaman's work to open up a space for energy to flow and then transmute that negative energy and make it positive for life. That's part of the principles of everything is energy. And that's the way they work.
Thank you for sharing that with us, because I think that does bring it to life a little bit about the healing. And what was really vivid for me was this moving of the particles, and they even use that word. So that's a beautiful way to visualize it, isn't it? The moving of energy, this moving of the particles.
It is. And there's one other principle that I think is really important, which shows up in my book as well, that I was at the beginning of my journey, I wasn't understanding, and I came to understand by the end of my journey. And that's this concept of power and love. And not in the sense that you and I might think a Western perspective, but shamans operate from a place of power, either exerting their power or taking power from others. And I saw this. It's a really interesting thing to watch. When shamans come together, especially I would say in my experience, it was indigenous shamans. Okay. It wasn't the Western type of shaman. Okay. So when they came together, I could sense that there was like a battle going on between them sometimes around power. And then power. And he had said to me at one time, don't let so-and-so touch or hug you. It was a relative of his. And I couldn't understand that. This is at the very beginning. I said, well, I don't understand that. And later, when I came to understand why he said that, he says, because in a way, that hug, if that person has ill intent, they're taking power from him by taking either another shaman's wife or showing some kind of inappropriateness or whatever. And so he would always say to me, there are certain people I don't want you touching. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
The shamans are very vigilant. And then when it comes to love is power, but it's not the way we look at power from Western culture. It's through universal love, not emotional love. And that is where a shaman's work and transformation occurs. The shaman's work can be an expression of cosmic love, and it's unencumbered by human emotion and what he used to call it infantile love that most humans know. To experience universal love, which is the love from the spiritual center, I always thought of Rumi, the poet, because in his poetry, and I think Hafiz does this too, they call love or this divinity, Rumi calls it the beloved. This is the kind of love that has power to transform and to create anything in the material world. And we've forgotten that we are love and we are the source of love. And we go about our lives projecting this source out onto other people in an attempt to get love from someone else.
Yep.
But we forget that we are love itself. We're looking for it out there and it's in here.
Right. And we make our love conditional, that kind of thing, don't we? We make it conditional, or we expect it to be shown to us in a certain way, dictated to by us. And I guess what you're saying is that, no, it's way bigger than that.
And it comes from inside. And that's kind of the point about love. It's like, if we're trying to fill a void, then what we're really looking for is relief. We're not looking for love. We're looking for relief. Relief from that void, relief from loneliness. So if we are full and we understand that we are love and we can express self-love, not in a narcissistic way, but in a way that's, I would sometimes prefer self-appreciation or self-value, then there's no need to look for it out there.
Gosh, that's actually really powerful. Yeah, if we master that, there's no need to keep searching for something external.
Right. There isn't.
As a shaman's wife, I think I can see, I'm just kind of putting myself into your position, and I can see how, and also I know your story, and I don't want to spoil anything for your readers of The Shaman's Wife, but equally, we have talked a lot that this is a story of differing emotions, differing kinds of love, differing kinds of experiences. And something that's coming up for me now, and thank you for sharing about explaining a little more about shamanism, but something that I just want to pick up, and I think this would be I would love to continue this next week in our next episode. And that's around, as a result of your relationship with the shaman, being the shaman's wife, I know that your life has had challenging times.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I would really love us to touch on is how you take that with all of the knowledge you have now around shamanism and how you take the trauma of times in your life and turn that into some of the gold that you now use moving forward with your life. You know, the work you do now, it's no surprise because we talk about this. You are no longer in the rainforest. You're no longer in Ecuador, in fact, and you're in Portugal. So of course your life has taken, different roads since the time you write about with the shaman, with Napo. So is that something we could come on to in our next episode? But just to round out this episode, how do you personally feel now about shamanism? Having been through what you've been through, come settle to a life in Portugal, still a spiritual life. I know you're an incredibly spiritual person, but I guess what I'd love to finish with, is just how you feel about the whole concept of shamanism now from where you are now.
That's a great question. You know, it's interesting because when you were asking the question, I was thinking about this morning on the cliffs, walking with Sophie. And I think that the difference is it's a lived experience for me now. It's not just a concept. It's like a lived experience. And so it's like, you know, I used to have like blinders on, if you will, or we all have a lens through which we experience our lives. And that I don't have the same lens anymore. My lens is completely different as a result of this journey I took. So for me, I experience shamanism when in the simplest things, like when I'm in my garden or even making myself a cup of tea, or like this morning when I was up on the cliffs, I was just sitting with Sophie watching the waves, and it was just a really gorgeous morning and just listening to the birds. And I saw a falcon fly by. We have falcons here. I call it a falcon, hawk falcon. It has like a whistle. I could see it diving and flying around the cliffs. It's a way of noticing life in a completely different way for me. I think that's the change. It's like being so acutely present to those moments where my whole life contracts into a moment. So I'm watching that falcon and I'm in that moment watching that falcon and nothing else. There's nothing else out here, right? I'm not worried about what I'm going to do in my office. I'm not worried about any deadlines. I'm in that moment, and I'm able to do that automatically now in a way that I could never be present like that before. That is one of the things that I don't even want to say I learned, because when I say I learned, it feels like I did it on purpose. I didn't actually do it on purpose.
It's like absorbing something, isn't it? Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. It's you lived it and you absorbed it. Yeah. Yeah. Osmosis. Maybe that's using a natural metaphor. Are you more alive now than you were before that first trip?
I think I'm alive in a very different way. I'm alive in a very different way because I have those moments of presence. And because I'm alive in a completely different way, I notice things that people don't notice. I think that's a huge benefit for my clients, because if I'm having a conversation with a client or like they're here on retreat, I'm kind of operating on all sensual cylinders. I'm hearing, listening, intuiting, speaking, feeling. So I've got all of this going on. Whereas, you know, in my work, you know, years ago, it's just this. it's just the head and the mind. And now it's like everything is engaged. And so if that's aliveness, then yes. Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been really incredible conversation. Well, really good episode. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I can't wait for next week just to dive again a bit deeper into lessons, I guess, for readers. This episode has been much more about just kind of explaining some of those principles. But I think next week we're going to really talk a lot more about how, as you're listening, there are going to be lessons that Alicia's going to share with us around how you take gold from out of what is on the surface traumatic experiences, or what feels like negativity, how you can turn some of those into really the gold for your life moving forward. So we will see you again next week. In the meantime, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me again. And I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jill. Always a pleasure.
Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that getting our heads together this week has filled your mind with what's possible. If you love the show, would you do me a massive favour, please? Would you leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts? It would really help me put more heads together, reach more ears and expand more minds. Until next week, bye for now.